Welcome to another edition of Around with Randall, your weekly podcast on making your nonprofit more effective for your community. And here is your host, the CEO and founder of Hallett Philanthropy, Randall Hallett.
It's such a pleasure to have you join me, Randall, on this edition of Around with Randall. We take the last step of our great questions in the relationship building process, really looking at stewardship. We started all the way back when we talked about how do we get into these conversations, and we talked about calls and quals, as I kind of try to entitle them, making those calls, having those visits, the cultivation, solicitation, and closing. Today is stewardship, our final fifth of five on how to really engage and what things you should be asking yourself to engage at a higher level. Really only three big questions here in stewardship, but I think they're really important ones. One more philosophical that I think can have a huge effect on how you look at what you do in stewardship, and then the other two are probably a little bit more tactical. Let's jump in. The question I want to start with is the philosophical one, and it's simply this. Do you realize that stewardship as a name, as a category, is almost a misnomer? Some of you might be saying, what's he talking about? Stewardship has always been, as described in our education, for those who had a formal education, maybe in philanthropy, certainly as a learned experience, stewardship's the end of the journey. And I've always wondered why we think that. It's always been mysterious to me. Because if we steward correctly, we actually are doing something that we've already done in terms of a category or thought process, but we're just doing it differently. Stewardship should be for not all gifts, and maybe it is the completion of a journey for someone who wants to be philanthropic. But for many, stewardship is cultivation. And where we fail is in the knowledge that our most likely donors, time after time after time, study after study after study, data piece after data piece after data piece tells us that our most likely donors are the ones who've already given to us. And so the question becomes, if you view it only as an ending point and not as maybe a stepping stone in a more complete, deeper relationship based on their passion, based on the fact your mission meets with their passion, then all you're doing is leaving dollars on the table. And you're not allowing people to make the kind of emotional investment that they want to really make the difference that they're trying to get to. So how should we look at this? I spend more and more of my time with gift officers and certainly in stewardship process, thinking about it as a requalification conversation. That when we steward either formally or individually, so formally organizationally, individually, in terms of what a gift officer or one person can do, which we'll talk about here in a moment, both of those should be bent or consider the thought process of how we would qualify people back into a recultivation, a new cultivation for another, hopefully larger, more impactful gift. And as a part of this process, there are some things that are data-driven. If you are seeing too many live bunts last year, but unfortunately not this, that's a term that's used a lot by the annual giving teams, but it should be important to all of us. If someone's given to you last year, why aren't you engaging with them? And that's the same as bunts some year, but unfortunately not this. So they gave some year in the past, but not this year. If we know that our most likely donors are our past donors, our current donors, people that have given to us, then we need to be engaged. So part of this is, how do you figure that out? Who are the people that you should be prioritizing? Well, if you have people that have given and they, let's say, screen higher, you want to engage them at a higher level. Maybe there's more potential there. Or someone who's given a $5,000 gift and they haven't given it again this year. Are you interacting with them? Are you having conversations with them? Or they made a gift or have an estate gift, possibly from the past, and you're not spent a lot of time with them. All of these things are, even in the planned giving example, places where you should be getting or thinking about or hoping for or trying to develop another gift in the conversation, a new gift. Also, we should be running reports statistically on when pledges end. Are you going back to those people? Especially if they pledged a capital campaign gift or a large gift, are you having discussions? Maybe you don't get, let's say someone made $100,000 gift, they're paying it over 4 years to $25,000 a year. You may not get $25,000 a year, but if they're that engaged with you, could you go back and talk to them about 2,500, 5,000, 10,000? They may see it as a discount. You're seeing it as a connection. All of this is really an important philosophical question, because if we aren't always thinking about requalification, and I'll give you one other example. Are people showing up at events and you're like, why are they here? They're looking for something. Maybe someone even says something verbally. What's going on? What's the next greatest thing? They're looking for something. Does that mean they're going to make a gift? No. But the requalification process, the onus should be to try to engage them and find out what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they want. And in doing so, what you'll find is people will self-select into this qualification process, which, by the way, is a lot easier than the first qualification when you don't know them. If you've built a relationship, you can ask more engaging, personal, direct questions because you know them. There's a respect, a rapport that should be developed or has been developed in the conversation. So the philosophical question that I think we all need to think about, whether it's an organizational wide stewardship effort or an individual gift officer taking on us, we're going to talk about those two here in just a moment. Are you understanding? Do you realize that stewardship isn't the end of the journey? It's a misnomer if you do, that for some, it's just the first of many steps that they will go through if we really want to get to transformational giving, that emotional, passionate engagement with our mission. Question one. Let's pivot from the philosophical and get into the tactical. What is it? Maybe some things you can do. And I gave you a few of those with live months and side months and reporting, but let's get even further into it. The second question is, do you have, and does your organization have, a formalized strategy or chart of stewardship? When I do trainings and conversations about stewardship, I always use kind of three big examples, and they're always in a chart. And I'm sorry, I'm process oriented. I like to kind of know the check marks. Are we getting things done? But I see a lot of smaller organizations, shops of 2 or 3, 4 people, thinking they have to try to equate stewardship like a university that has 275 people, and you don't. So this chart strategy is all based on the concept of what things should we be doing at gift levels or the kinds of gifts that are being given. And a simplistic chart can be one that says anybody above 1,000 gets a call from the chair of the board. Anybody under 1,000 gets a letter and a call, maybe let's say between $100 and $1,000 from the chief development officer, the chief executive, depending on the size of the organization. And everybody under 100, we make sure they get a letter that says how appreciative we are of them. You would think, well, that's pretty, isn't that what everyone does? You'd be surprised how many times I've walked into scenarios and there's no process. Well, some people get a, kind of a call. Why do they get a call? And you can add layers to that depending on the size of the organization, the time you have. By the way, I'm just going to be blunt. I don't ever want to hear someone say, we don't have any money for stewardship. Did you know that 80% of the nonprofits in the United States have $10,000 or less to spend on stewardship? Stewardship doesn't have to cost. It has to be heartfelt. So part of this list or chart, organizational wide, could be over certain dollar amounts. We have naming opportunities, and that fits into some type of categorization that's been approved by the organization to put their name or a plaque on something. It could be as, hey, you get newsletters or some type of lunch with the CEO or the C-suite, or you can do as much as you want and make it very simple. The medium level gets into more complicated things, like they start getting invitations to certain events. They have an opportunity to have private time with certain people. Maybe they are, by the way, a basic stewardship thing, just take notes to a board meeting and have board members say, hey, thanks for your gift. Intermediate, back to intermediate, might be more detailed, involving, okay, now we've got to do recognition at certain levels, and we have annual reporting standards and things of that nature. The large organizations, their chart looks like, it's 20 columns across and 40 columns down. We're into endowed shares and what kind of recognition they get, what kind of press releases we do. They have access to certain things. If it's a big enough gift, let's say for a university, maybe they're invited to football games in a box at a certain level, or they have private time with the dean or the hospital CEO. And then we're into real naming, depending on the level. And there's a process one would go through for naming, where we're naming buildings or atriums or entrances, departments, endowed chairs. All of those things are really detailed. But what I want to get across is you do not need to have a 40 down list of stewardship and 20 across of all the different levels. And you could be now dealing with, we treat the $1 million donor different than the $500,000 different than the 250 different than the 100,000. That's kind of that gift level going across. You don't need that if you're a small organization. The question really is driving to the thought process of, do you have an organizational plan? Do you have a formal strategy to steward that's repetitive and easy and fits your budget? But the most important thing is it heartfelt? Which positions us right to number 3. So number 2, does your organization have a formal strategy, chart, process to steward donors on a regular basis? Third and last question. Do you, I don't care if you're a gift officer, a board member, a physician, a faculty member, whoever you are, do you personally steward? All too often, particularly in larger organizations, if we go to question from just a second or two back to 2, and you've got this big chart of things we do, there seems to be a concept or thought that the individual gift officer is now off the hook of stewarding. Well, they do that. That's in the chart. And I want to look at them and say, are you not legitimate? Are you not interested in the actual relationship? Isn't that the fun part? Individual stewarding in philanthropy in a foundation, development office, advancement office, however you want to look at it, I always thought about it not equating to, but aiming at stewarding the relationship I have with my wife. Not as important. The boss is always the most important thing I think about and engage with every day. She's the best. But the thought process is very similar. How I steward my relationship with my wife is based on communication and trust and emotion and appreciation and a level of interdependency that comes from a lifetime of caring. Now, you can take all of those on steroids and get to what's, at least I hope and think of as, a great marriage. But if you take them at raw face value, this is what we're aiming for with our donors. Legitimate rapport and care that's based on allowing their emotions to feel like they're making a difference, that we're communicating with them often, and they feel like the relationship is actually legitimate, because it should be. So what are the things that you can do? I have a client. She, as the chief development officer, is the single greatest steward of relationships. Take away philanthropy, money, fundraising, just stewarding relationships I have ever seen. I get notes, in particular when things, and we work very closely together based on what we need to do and how I can support their organization's effort. I get notes at home because things happen in life. Your daughter gets sick, or something, just life. All of a sudden, I got a text, I got an email. Is everybody okay? Tornado came through Omaha. First thing, are you all right? It looked close to your house. That's stewarding. I'm not a donor. I serve her. I serve that organization as a consultant. She's a single greatest steward, and there is no organizational chart for that. That's just her. Well, the same is true of the things we can do to make our donors feel like we genuinely and should genuinely care, not organizationally, personally. Give you some examples. We learned this, or were reminded, maybe it's a better way to put it, about during COVID, during the pandemic. Videos, as lots of people were bringing food to caregivers, particularly in the front end of the pandemic, were bringing in food and taking an iPhone and going down to the head of ED and saying, "Is there just life's just turned upside down instantaneously?" Having them do a video with the head of the ED saying, "I want to thank all the people in our community who brought us food. We couldn't be more appreciative. We are living on the edge, but we're doing so because of these kind of things. People giving us recognition and appreciation for what we're doing." It doesn't have to be a video that is with mass amount of music. And by the way, all those things I think you can do on your iPhone. It's not my technology knowledge that I have, but it's authentic. It doesn't have to be manufactured. It shouldn't be. Videos. Every night that I'm away, I get on FaceTime with my kids. I'm stewarding that relationship. I leave them videos when I got on airplanes and tell them, here's where I am, here's what I'm doing, that I love them and I miss them. I'm doing the same for my wife. They're just signs that I care. How can you use videos from faculty members, doctors and nurses, others that say, thanks for what you do for us? And it's just a nice sign. 2 is just calling. Can you call and talk? How you doing? What's going on? And you learn about their life, about their relationships, children, spouses, significant others. How's everybody doing? I work so hard to keep a mental list of the people I deal with, like my insurance agent. He had a shoulder surgery. I'm always asking him as we go through renewals about the house and the car in terms of insurance, how's your shoulder? He goes, I can't believe you remember because I care. What are you doing to care for the people that are making it possible for your organization to not only survive, but flourish? 3, give them something to see that they don't normally get to see, the behind the scenes stuff. The best one I ever was involved with happened earlier in my career when I was working in private secondary independent schools and leading philanthropy there. And it was our reunion weekend. And this was a very traditional, unbelievably historic school with alums who had gone on to do incredible things. It was a stepping stone. And the one thing that I knew that they relished more than anything else was based on the stories was time, reliving time that they had when they were at the school. So on alumni weekend, I started at 4 hours early instead of starting it on the Friday at noon with the lunch. I actually started at 8 a.m. for those that wanted to, and I took them and I paired them with a current student wearing a similar uniform that they wore, and they went to class with them. And the emotion at that lunch changed instantaneously that first year because I was stewarding their emotional connection. And that led to some very large new gifts or repeat gifts because I was getting them back into a place where it meant something to them personally. You have a lot of those kind of opportunities. What can you get them to see and feel that they normally wouldn't if they were just in the general public? They wouldn't have access to. Again, it doesn't have to cost you any money. Number 4 are cards. Are you sending cards? I'll give my mom credit for this, stewarding a relationship. In college, in those first couple of years, I thought I was ready to go to school, but it turned out I probably should have waited a year. First year or two were academically were fine, but I just wasn't ready emotionally. But I remember distinctly getting cards for in September for Hanukkah or for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I'm not Jewish. Neither's my mom. All the card said was, I love you. I'm thinking about you. Want you to know it. Proud of you. I still have those cards. You can go to Dollar Tree and get 2 cards for $1. The organization won't pay for it. You pay for it. Get all kinds of cards. Thinking of you, graduation, birthday, Hanukkah, Christmas, Mother's Day, whatever it is, and have a box full of them in a drawer and just keep pulling them out and sending cards, thinking of you. It makes all the difference in the world in terms of what people think of you and the relationship that you have. The final one is probably the most powerful. And that's where you get the donor to meet the recipient of the good that has been done, the gifts that have come. I've done this in healthcare. You have to get permission, but people who gave immense amount of money for research or for a particular area that they help rebuild. And I bring the patients in and let them tell the story of what this meant to them. I don't ever talk about dollars. I don't talk about, well, they made $1 million gift. They made a $5. They made a gift. They wanted your life to be better. I'd love for you to introduce you to them. Man, you talk about stewarding people and keeping them involved and engaged. May cost you a cup of coffee. Whether it's videos or the calls or the behind the scene tours or the cards or meeting, none of those cost very much money. But they have everything in common when you think about the authentic nature, the emotional nature that brings. So the third and final question is and was and is, do you individually steward? Number 1, is there a strategy and a chart? Number 2, are you realizing, number 1 is realizing, are you realizing that stewardship's really cultivation? Number 2 is organizationally, do you have a process strategy chart? Number 3 is what are you doing individually? What I'm hoping is we can elevate stewardship not to be the end of the journey for a lot of people, but maybe the first step in many, and that we get to grow and build into the future of more deeper, more meaningful, more passion-driven, transformational relationships, allowing people to make a difference for the things they believe in. If you want to get a hold of me, it's podcast@philanthropy.com. Don't forget to check out the blogs. I'm seeing a lot more traffic. 2 a week. Try to get those out. You can get an RSS feed right to your inbox and to your front door. All ways that you can continue to learn, much like if you're spending a little time with me here today on the podcast. I really appreciate you and what you're doing in your community. I tell when I speak that if I believe in gratitude, and I do entirely, that I need to finish more often with thank yous. And so thank you for what you're doing. You may, most likely, not in my community, but you're making a big difference. Don't forget my favorite saying. Some people make things happen. Some people make things happen. Some people watch things happen. Then there are those who wondered what happened. Being someone who makes things happen is a lot of energy, but it's worth it because it's affecting people and things that are wondering what happened. I don't know a better way to live a life, professionally and personally, if you're not thinking about how do I make the world a better place. Philanthropy isn't about money. It's about love of mankind. If we think about how we can help others more often, inside our family, inside our organizations, in the world in general, the world's a better place. And not just in totality, but for your individual perspective as well. I'll look forward to seeing you and being with you next time on the next edition of Around with Randall. Don't forget, make it a great day.